Hi, I'm Dick Miller, and along next to me is a good friend, Jeff Smith, who serves as our senator. And we're going to talk a while, right?
We are. It's,
Okay, there's a lot to talk about, I'm afraid, but
yeah, it's a busy time.
the half hour is going to go quickly. And as I indicated prior to us beginning here, why don't you let us know some of your upcoming district events where you touch base with your constituents.
So, of course, as you know, I do that on a regular basis
Mhm.
anyways with my truck. But these are scheduled events that we're doing budget presentations, actually, because we are in budget season right now. So the next one's coming up May 23rd. That's a Tuesday in Arcadia. We're going to be 6 o'clock, starting at 6 o'clock at the Wannock Center Community Room on Raider Drive. On the 24th, the very next day, on Wednesday the 24th, we'll be in Osseo at the City Hall Community Room. And then we're going to do a Zoom presentation as well on June 1st, because I know it's hard for people to get to these other places. We want to make sure we give everybody opportunity as much as possible. Then we finish up June 11th in Eau Claire. We'll be at the Owen Park Pavilion starting at 6 o'clock. So those are the four that we have scheduled right now, one of them being virtual. And we have already been in Ellsworth, Melrose, Mindoro. We did one there, and we've been in, we have one coming up in River Falls as well. So, but they're not particularly this listening audience here.
So obviously, the primary purpose is to touch base with the voters in the district, the citizens here. And your goal is to do what at that?
Well, it's kind of it's a presentation to educate people on the budget process and what had been presented by the governor and where we're at. So each time we present, we're going to have a little more information probably, because it changes like every week now, as the Joint Finance Committee last week chose to throw out everything that the governor had presented, which I shouldn't say that's not a surprise. They actually said they're going to do that the same night that he presented it without ever looking at it. So it's unfortunate place that we are these days. It's a very partisan process. A couple things they did hang on to, though, in there that we're pleased with, but some of those things can come back as well. So that's why we want to present what those options are, so that people know what they could see in the budget, and then get them interested in keeping an eye on how that budget is worked out.
Okay. Well, I know today we're going to be covering the information as of this day in terms of what's been going on or what's happening with the budgetary process. And to inform our viewers, this is a 2-year process. Every 2 years, you prepare a budget for the next 2 years. And review with us the goal normally in terms of completion of this budget.
Yeah, so we have a June 30th deadline, supposedly. So July 1st is the beginning of a new fiscal year, and we go 2 years at a time, 2-year budget process period. So that's why we have a June 30th deadline. If we don't agree by June 30th, which has happened in some years, it's been quite a while since that's happened, but it can happen. I remember one year we went to October before we came to a solution. But we are not like federal government. We don't close down because we can't agree on a budget. We just continue to use the old budget to work off of if we can't agree on a new budget. So, but it starts in November of the previous year. So in the November of last year, the agencies presented their ideas to the governor and asked for what they thought they needed to be able to continue to operate. And then the governor's office works off of those numbers along with other ideas that we might present them through the legislature to build the budget that he presents to us in February, which he's done. And then from that date on, it's in the hands of the legislature, which in other words is Joint Finance Committee now. The Joint Finance Committee is made up, of course, the legislature is overseen by the Republicans, who have the majority number of seats, and they determine the number of seats on the Joint Finance Committee, which is 16, and 12 of them they assign to their members. So there's 12 Republicans and 4 Democrats on Joint Finance Committee.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It isn't based on a number of seats held necessarily, is it?
No, not necessarily, no.
Oh, okay, okay. So for 4 members, now, are you serving on this committee?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so those 4 members are, for them to, in some areas, it's going to be an uphill battle for them.
It is. And it's unfortunate. I mean, if it was even closer gap, you know, I mean, I understand majority holds the majority seats, but if it were, say, 10-6 instead of 12-4 or something like that, even 9-7, or what am I trying to get at? Yeah, 9-7. You know, then there might be some give and take and some conversations, but it leaves those 4 members in a place where they really don't have much to do other than to be loud voices for the voters that they hear from. And I probably skipped a step that, in fact, during the previous month, they're done with that now, but previous month they held 4 public hearings across the state, one of which was in Eau Claire. And that's typical. I wish they'd actually hold about 6 instead of 4, but they did 4, and they were all day affairs. And you like to take those, what you hear from those, and that's what the 4 members do, is take what they hear from there, and basically it's polling, right? This is what the public is saying. This is what we should be doing.
Kind of a frustration game.
Politics.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Today's politics.
Yeah, I think it's hard to be the minority. And as we've talked in the past, 20, 30, 40 years ago, I don't think that there was quite that. I think the minority's voice was heard a little more loudly, and perhaps there was more joint efforts made on important legislation.
Yeah, and like I said before, I served in all these situations. When I first was elected to the Assembly, I was in the minority in the Assembly, but the Democrats had a majority in the Senate, and a governor who was a Democrat. But we had to have a conference committee to actually decide the budget. That means having to agree on things and come to some compromises, and that worked pretty well. So, yeah, and even when we had the majority, because I also served in a 2-year term when I was in the majority, but we had such a slim majority that, again, it was a matter of give and take and making sure that everybody had a voice. And we heard hearings on Republican bills, believe it or not, and gave them opportunities as well.
Well, I, you know, being that you and I maybe lean towards the progressive side, I think you and I both agree that there is a great deal of knowledge and insight held by members of both parties. That if they could share their insights,
there is,
and energies.
There is, Dick, and that, you know, we all have ideas, and and none of us are right 100% of the time.
Yeah.
We're lucky if we're right 50% of the time. And you learn from other people. You really do. And if we have an opportunity to conversation with colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you know, I learn from them and they learn from me. But we don't have a lot of that opportunity these days.
Well, if you don't listen to each other, the knowledge that each have is just going this way. It's not coming together and forming some better ideas, you know. I guess most times if you sit down in a room of 10 people, you combine all your good ideas, you probably have a better idea in the end, you know, and you and I both have experienced that, I'm sure. But maybe we should go into some of the budget items that have been possibly changed or eliminated by the Republican majority as they work on their own budget.
Yeah, we should talk about things like paid family and medical leave. That was an interesting one, and because I like to help explain that because it isn't what you might think. So because we have a surplus, this is a really great opportunity for something like this to introduce this program. With the surplus, we could use part of that surplus, not a lot of it even, but enough to get it off the ground. So it ends up, a program like this, paid family medical leave, which in Governor Evers' budget proposal would have given someone up to 12 weeks leave for taking care of ill members of the family, aging parents, and of course after birth and you get a new baby in the family. Those sorts of things happen to every family at some point or another. And it isn't about coming out of our general fund, other than this initial kick-in to get it started. It's a program that works off of payroll deductions, just like workers' compensation. So it goes into a pool, and that's why it take a couple years for that pool to build, and we would support it through this surplus those first couple of years, and then it'd be self-supporting by 2026, is what I understand. So it makes a lot of sense, and we know a lot of statistics from other countries who do this sort of thing and how it actually brings back. I had numbers in my presentation. It's pretty amazing how many more people would bring back into the workforce actually, and the income that they would be providing as well that goes back into our economy. It works, and it really could work, and we just have to. But unfortunately, that was one of the items that came out. Mental health. The governor had proposed $270 million to go into mental health support for our schools, and we know that since the pandemic, our students really struggled having to take their lessons from home, and some fell back, unfortunately, because it's different than being in person, and there's accountability. And all sorts of other things, not having that social time with their friends and all those. This is important. And I think we got to quit talking about mental health like it's separate from healthcare, to tell you, in my opinion. It is healthcare. It is just another part of the body. There are things that needs to be supported, and we need to pay attention to. We all know that.
Well, I think, just the discussion I had earlier in the week with the staff at the County Care Center, and it is very difficult to find mental health workers. And I think increasing the number needed, it'll make it even more difficult, but it will also tell the student who wants to go on to college that there's a place for them out there, that effort to gain that degree or advanced degree will allow them to go to work in that field. And I agree. I think we need to do more for the mental health of people throughout the area. It's kind of interesting because in Texas, and I'm going to go into national politics briefly. In Texas, the discussion after the death of these several people due to a gunman was we need more mental health. Well, there is a shortfall in this country of people who are able to go in and stay in that profession. And I think there's a burnout rate too. So I think when we talk about investing, we also have to be talking about investing maybe in education for those who want to enter the field.
So and this money goes partly into educating and that end of it. So because we're short of psychiatrists, there's a statistics I don't have on me in front of me right now, but there's statistics of areas of Wisconsin that have little or no psychiatrists, and the schools are short on counselors as well. And we have got to pay attention to this. I know someone who recently told me that when they moved up here, they didn't have they couldn't get their prescription filled because they didn't have a psychiatrist that they were connected to here, and it was going to take some months to get into that psychiatrist's office to get that prescription filled, and they went without their meds for quite a while. That's dangerous. those sorts of things
Absolutely.
are dangerous. So you're right, there's a shortage, and that's important. And tax relief for middle class. This is what Governor Evers' budget proposal included: a 10% tax cut targeted at middle and low income earners. We have a really good slide. We do a slideshow for the presentation that shows the difference between the proposal that the Republicans are talking about, which is famously known as a flat tax, and what the governor had proposed. And you can see a huge difference between who really comes out on top. And we want to make sure that low wage earners and middle class earners are the ones who get the break. And that's what the governance is about. We could, again, if you attend one of my presentations, we can show you that comparison where unfortunately the flat tax idea is about giving the millionaires a huge break and the low wagers nothing. It really wouldn't change at all what they.
It's not progressive.
It is not progressive.
So yeah. Sometime we'll spend some time on that topic.
I know it's a huge topic right now.
Yeah.
And then PFAS standards, as we know, in our area, all across the state, actually, there's a PFAS issue, but we haven't been able to fund testing to find out. So a lot of people would rather bury their head in the sand and not know that they are drinking contaminated water. But the governor had standards based into his budget that the Joint Finance Committee threw out. So it's going to be, and that's just disappointing. Of course, everybody needs to rely on the water that they're drinking and making sure that what we know as dangerous chemicals are not going into your water.
Now, just remind the viewers, you're talking about things that were taken out of the governor's recommended budget.
Things that have been taken out of the budget
by the majority party
Yeah.
at this point. Okay, I
That's
just want to
right.
remind the viewers, because I think this is important to know where this is coming from. So if you have some feeling or opinion, you need to talk to people about
Yeah, right. Call us, call my office, call your state representative in the governor's office, and show up if you can. Broadband expansion. Now you hear me talk about that a lot because that's been a real benchmark of my office, is that we've introduced a number of bills that the governor implemented into his budget that, of course, the Republicans then threw out. But one of the things that they did was they just cut it out completely. The governor was proposing $750 million to be added to the grant program, and the grant program's working. And so we need to be sure to protect that grant program. We need to fund that grant program, and between that $750 million and what is coming also in from the federal programs right now, we could be done with making sure fiber is going to every house and every business in the state of Wisconsin, and that's our goal. So, I don't know. We'll see what's down the road, because they may be throwing something out, but maybe they'll have a better idea. Let's hope they have some better ideas, or ideas that'll work anyway. This is, I got to always mention marijuana legalization. The governor had, legalization in his budget. Well, recent polls show that it's commanding majority of Wisconsinites support marijuana legalization. And the governor's budget would have taken tax revenue from marijuana sales and invested it into community funds. I have also in my presentation a statistic that $36 million has been reported spent in Illinois alone from Wisconsin residents on marijuana. There's a photo a colleague of mine took of a parking lot of a shop across the border from Beloit, all Wisconsin license plates. We're not taking advantage of that. Besides the fact that I like to make sure to remind people it's about making it safer. Like anything else, it's like your food products. You want the inspectors to be sure that your food products are safe, that you're buying at the store. Right now, if you're a user of marijuana, you can't be sure of how safe it is, and people are dying because of being laced with fentanyl or something else that is killing them. So that's a really important part of that. And then there's firearms, which you mentioned the Texas thing, and we've had some really heartbreaking situations right here in northwestern Wisconsin recently
Yes.
with 3 police officers killed in the past month.
In fact, there's a funeral going on right now, I
Yeah.
understand.
That's right. As we're speaking, they're laying Deputy Leesky, I think is her name, was, yeah, the rest. But what bothers me, this has really been upsetting me, is that the Republican majority is silent on this at the worst possible time when terrible things like that happen. Not a peep. When in fact, if they would have kept in the budget the background checks and the extreme risk protection order that was there, and we've been introducing these things for many sessions, and not even a hearing. And I'm just going to tell you, I may have read this in my recent column as well. The family of the shooter in Cameron told in the report that not only did he bully them, the shooter, he told them he was going to kill cops if they pulled him over, and he had 2 guns in his car. They could have gone to the police with that and to a judge and had those weapons removed, at least temporarily, because obviously he was mentally unstable. And
yeah, that's the red flag
was
law,
preventable.
basically.
That was preventable.
Now, that's what we call a red flag law.
They call them red flag laws, but that could have been prevented, and it's even more upsetting knowing that.
And I think what's so interesting about it is that it doesn't take those guns away until officially the judge has to
you got to go through a process.
So they have their day in court, so to speak. So it
and
isn't.
It's temporary.
Yes.
It's not a permanent take your guns away. It's a temporary until you can stabilize the situation and or their health.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just other things that were stripped away was the Wisconsin tuition promise, and also a $35 cap for insulin copays. That was stripped out of the budget. When we don't go down that road. We don't have enough time to go down that road and complain about how we're supporting this outrageous profits of the drug companies over people's lives. We wanted to create an office of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Actually, I think it was actually for Native Americans. Can't remember what the office was actually going to be called, but that was taken out of there as well. And we've got an issue, of course, in that regard. I know I've been serving on the task force on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and it's heartbreaking, and it's something we need to actually take seriously and do something about, instead of just burying our head in the sand on that. Well, we just think that Governor Evers' budget did a lot of good things. And when you talk about that $7 billion surplus, it was a matter of being frugal and smart about using that as one-time funding for things that we need, and getting them off the ground, like I mentioned in the family medical leave. There were other items like that. So there's things we can do, a lot of good things we can do right now, but we are, I'm going to complain one more time that we're talking today on May 11th, and I just got a notice we are not going to the floor next week. So that means for 4.5 months of this year, we've been to the floor 3 times in the state Senate. And most of those have been for pretty innocuous bills and appointments that we've been approving.
Okay, and when you say that number, you're talking about days?
Yes.
Or
3 days.
And they may not be full days anyway.
Oh no, they're usually 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours at the most.
So all of if there is anything going on, it's going to be in committees.
Yeah, that's been pretty slim as well.
Yeah.
There's just not been a motivation by the majority party, who determines bills we hear, bills that come to votes. They determine all of that. And there's not a lot of motivation to move on things right now.
I don't know if our audience will agree to this, but it seems to me like perhaps the state of Wisconsin is not getting their money's worth. And I'm not pointing out any individual.
No,
I'm simply saying that you don't meet for a full year basically. I mean you know it's normally not a full year, but you are full-time legislators.
we should act like it.
Yeah. With all these important issues out there, there is time to deal with them, to talk about them, to argue about them.
Yeah.
But it's not taking place.
So I will add, in fact, when we mentioned, for instance, marijuana, and there are other. So there's been. Why do we know the vast majority of people support marijuana legalization? Is because county after county and municipality after municipality have added to their ballot the question, so that we can find out. We in Wisconsin don't have voter initiated legislation, but we do have voter referenda questions to measure where we're at. The Republicans in their shared revenue plan would remove the ability of municipalities to have those ballot questions on there. They would take away your voice or your opportunity to have your voice heard. They don't want to know that they're not doing their job. And because time after time, to tell you the truth, the legislature looks bad when 70% of the people say one thing and we ignore it. So, and it's not just marijuana, it's a lot of other things, gerrymandering, for instance, and other questions that are on the ballot.
I think maybe bring up two more topics here real quick. One being the governor was recommending a Badger Care expansion, whereby there'd be a $1.6 billion from the feds to help support family care or
Badger care.
Welfare of the people of this state. And we are only one of 9 or 10.
We're one of 10 now that accepted
and several of the Republican-leaning states have bought into the program.
And it isn't exactly, don't use the word welfare, because you still have to pay. If a person's on Badger Care, they pay, but they pay a lower rate that they can afford based on their income. And it is shameful that 87,000 people in this state are without health care because we won't do that. And I know we got to go now.
We've got to go. Thank you very much. We're going to hit maybe a couple points next time, I'm sure. We'll still be on the same topic. Thank you.